Item 4.
Yeah, I got a question about the dog park. So, was it public before and now it's private now?
No, it was a, well, Mary Michelle, where's Mary Michelle? Do you want to answer that?
Sure. So initially, a dog park wasn't included in the proposed development, and subsequently they came back and asked to include it, so then we had to take it out of the public open space.
Oh, okay.
So that's why what you'll see is that it was a relatively small area taken out of the open space. They actually offered to make it a public dog park, but then there's problems with maintenance and picking up, and we just didn't want to pick up the waste and be responsible, especially with our shortages of staffing. So we said, no, keep it as a private, but we need to recoup the lost park fees. So there's a dollar amount associated with it they're going to pay back to us.
Item 5. Item 6.
Question on the 495. I could never figure out how you got to 495.
I should have just came in.
The dollar amount, so
I saw 470, but I never could get to 495.
I will ask our purchasing team to help us with that.
This is for a buy.
To buy it, yes. You guys want to research that for the
Yes,
time?
I'm looking up that now.
Okay, so why don't we, if we get the answer before the end of this, great. If not, we can do it out there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
F. Item 7. Item 8. Item 9. And just a reminder, this has very specific language, so it will need to be read in its entirety by whoever
Brandy, you
makes
got that?
motion. Item 10, thanks Brandon. Item 11. I'm going to move item 11 all the way up to the beginning, so we're going to do that. Claire, do you want to do that before the public hearings even?
I think that'd be fine.
Okay. We will do that right after the pledges.
Awesome.
Reports. And then we do have closed session. No other comments on the regular agenda or consent agenda. We have item B for the workshop, which is the update of the Public Safety Complex project. I believe Mr. Ferris is going to be driving that.
There'll be a team, Mayor.
I thought this was your slide deck.
Howard. So, no, we have an update for you in several parts tonight of interest, so.
You can go to the next slide. So next one after that. All right, so we're going to start with giving you an update on where we are on the timeline. So every time we come to you, we kind of show you where we're moving forward on this. So we have just completed putting out 2 additional bid packages, and then we have the PNC Bank site condemnation hearing that was just held, and you guys will discuss that. It's already posted for a closed session tonight to discuss what that looks like. And then really next we start the actual construction stuff. So renovation construction of those temporary sites are going to begin. You guys have already done one, your first GMP. So with that, it was for the fire site. I believe the next one is going to be for the admin, police and fire admin site. And then the big kahuna, or I think Chris calls it the big enchilada or something like that. That's going to come right there in March of 2022. So you're going to see at the very end of this presentation a very complex staging for this site, because it's going to be, operations continue. There's going to be demo of certain properties, and then use of properties for parking, and then switching other areas of parking. So it becomes a very complex process. But you'll see there's a lot of movement in the next few months, very fast. March of 2023, you're right. No, March of 2022, yes. No, March of 2023.
Thank you. You're right.
That's a typo. Okay.
A while ago.
You're right. I'm there.
Glad we did
I'm
that.
with you.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, continue on. So I wanted Chris Swatter to come up here and talk more about the economy and what we're seeing in escalation, because as you remember last time, we were budgeting for a certain amount of escalation costs, and we said we're moving as fast as we can because we think additional may hit us, and the projections are showing it is.
Thanks. So when we were last here, we had 11.5 million in unfunded escalation that hit us. We were last here to report on June 20th. And we have identified another 8 million in unfunded escalation outside that target. A lot of our peers are seeing the same thing. Some people would say we're being too conservative. I wanted to give a shout out to our construction team that when they came in, they were $3.5 million more conservative than PPV's estimating team. As you will remember, we're doing parallel estimates, right? So then we worked with them for a week before we even talked to the design team to get that $3.5 million of overly conservative numbers out. So we ended up on a number we the two estimators, believe are prudent. That money came out of concrete and ballistic glazing, mechanical, electrical, and primarily those 4 areas. And that's because there were some quotes that, having received a bunch of concrete quotes, the contractor was using some of the more expensive quotes. We had different opinions. So to this prudent versus conservative, you have 2 estimating teams that get costs off the street constantly. And we both believe the numbers we're using now are prudent. We both have identified that 8 million in unfunded escalation. Just for your own thinking, 4 million of that is in concrete and steel alone. And we know we didn't change the concrete or steel in the project, so we've done a scrub. And the economy is definitely stalling. I mean, there's no question about that. Housing starts are down, housing sales are down, and China is starting to wobble a little bit. And the EU this winter, they're turning off huge amounts of manufacturing capacity and laying off large amounts of workers. So supply chain is actually easing in some, has gotten worse in a couple others, but overall the supply chain is, the ship is starting to right itself. The reason we are still being extremely conservative is the largest Bessemer steel furnace in Europe was just turned off by the steel manufacturer in Germany that runs it because they can't afford the gas to run it. And instead of exporting steel, they're buying steel from us. Same thing's true of aluminum, largest aluminum smelter in Europe. In Italy and Spain, the glass foundries are all turned off, and all those people are buying glass, aluminum, and steel from us. We have a heck of a lot of glass, aluminum, and steel in our project. And this winter, natural gas prices are up 30%. This winter, they're going to go up even further. And to make steel and concrete, you need a lot of natural gas. So we think we're presenting a prudent picture. We have 10% contingency and bidding reserves inside the construction cost estimates. So that's the report on the escalation. Headwinds piece, I open the up for questions.
We'll talk about how our strategy is going to be to handle this in a couple slides from here.
Right, Claire, we never bring a challenge without a solution, right?
Yes, sir.
Would you like the
Sure.
clicker? It's like handing off the baton in a race, right?
Okay, so that he talked about how they're cost overages related to inflation and escalation of costs, but I wanted to talk about the scope of the building. So when we came to you originally, when we basically decided on the price of the bonds that we were gonna sell, we had scoped it without a lot of detail, right? So then in June, we told you, okay, now we've got the designers at the table, and we've got all of our end users talking about their needs and going through this. And at the June meeting, we talked about there were some additions. And so one of the additions we knew we were gonna do, and I think council was in support of, is this is an opportunity for us to put that, the data center within the Hardin DOC, that we were gonna have a larger training room for 90 people instead of just 60 people. And that would also be an area in the Hardin facility. That you'd have the parking as well as the building built for our ultimate build out. Right, so for 30 years in the future, the life of the building, 30 to 50 years, what is going to be our ultimate capacity? We could build it for today, but you want room to grow because there is a need for growth in the police and the fire department as well. So anyway, with all of that, that added from the original scoping, not from June, 3,000 square feet. That equated to $1.3 million additional dollars. There was also additional costs related to security and IT, as well as additional ballistic glazing in the building for safety. And we would qualify that as safety and improvements on that. And then there were also increases to the interior systems as well as the exterior systems. So for example, exterior systems we had a goal for a certain amount of masonry to be on the outside of the building instead of, in some areas you have stucco, and so basically making sure there's more masonry. We wanted to reduce it down even more. We decided it was going to change the look significantly, so really keeping a larger amount of masonry in there was important to us from a look perspective. Staff's real direction has been obviously to make sure that this is a functional building as well as an aesthetically pleasing building and a safe building. Those are our three primary factors in looking at that. So when we came to you in June, we knew we basically had a much larger building in scope, but the team was basically told, go back to the end users, and we've got to cut and cut and cut. Bring this in budget. And so they cut as much as they could, made it as thin as they could, but at the end of the day, these were the things that were necessary as essential elements that brought that over budget. And I will tell you, with that $5.3 million, but for the escalation costs, we wouldn't really be here worried about anything. So with that, this is showing you kind of overages that we have. Now I do want to point out that this is a moment in time. So why this is a moment in time is because, as Chris said, we are going to be going out for those GMPs, and we will true those up as we go along. So the economy, if we're going out in March, may be or when we award it in March, may be different than it is now. But we can't gamble on that, right? The other thing to note, Chris is going to talk more about strategies, is how we can do alternatives in the bid documents, and he'll talk a little bit more of that in the next slide. But with all of that being said, at the end of the day, right now we have $111 million that's currently budgeted for this project. We ended up with the PNC Bank is estimated now at about $1.75 million, with maybe $50,000 of relocation costs. And that total plus the additional cost with escalation equal to that $15 million extra dollars. So that's a lot. But note that with cash flow, there are some things like FF&E that doesn't actually get put in until 2 years from now. But this is to let you know that this may impact future budget years as well. So Chris, you want to talk about our strategy?
Sure. This is our recommended strategy. We have the temporary facilities budgeted at $5 million. They all came in under budget. They're the off-site improvements to move people to, right? And then on January 16th, the parking and support and site packages will come before this group, and we'll tell you how we did. And I'll hold my hand up and say, I really hope I'm wrong, and I hope the contractor's wrong. But if we're not wrong, we can do what we need to do to get you the facility that will be operationally effective, safe, and to the quality and durability that you deserve. However, if we're wrong, We have a second emergency generator that we could purchase. We're gonna put the pad in and the conduit stub-ups in the base, but this emergency generator is a very, very good alternate. It can be added anytime later. It was originally in the base. This screening at the parking garage is a fabric wrap that goes around three, I would say maybe, one full end and two halves of the side, two half sides that screens the interior from the exterior. People looking at people inside the building. We have canopies on the top of the parking structure to shade them from the sun. And speaking of the sun, we have solar panels that we can put on top of those canopies. So these are our strategy on bid day. We will know if the market takes a turn the other way or if what we think is pretty prudent turns out to be conservative. This is all being bid as part of the parking structure. Any questions on these parking structure strategies? That's 42 million. So out of our 100 million, it's pretty easy to see, we'll dump 42% of our risk on this day. And we'll already have dumped, so we'll have about half of our risk, marketplace risk, by January 16th, and then we'll bring to you the recommended alternates that we would purchase. Then the order in which we would purchase them is pretty much here.
We have a little bit extra on this in that the parking structure does house the main generator that will function the entire building. The second generator is redundancy for the EOC, our computer room, and dispatch. We're also working with power company to bring in 2 separate circuits, 2 separate transformers, same substation, but that's another redundant guarantee, probably, in some cases, arguably, maybe better than these, because to lose an entire substation is very rare. When we have circuit outages in the city, that's 1,000 or 1,800 meters, but never really 2 subs. I've never known a substation to go totally down. A circuit, yes, but not 2 separate circuits. So we are working that to be a cost for the underground, but there's more to what you're looking at. But again, I think that makes the second emergency generator more of an acceptable alternate, because we're going to have this as well.
The other thing I was going to add to that is each one of these alternates, even the one down below, are I guess we could add all of those things later. It are items that if we don't buy now, they're discrete where they can be added on later. So this fabric around the outside, the mesh fabric around the outside of the parking garage is beautiful. You'll see it. Without it, it's going to look like a parking structure. It's not going to be very pretty. But if this is something that's a priority for council in future years, we could fund that. So I just want to make sure you guys are realizing that that's one of the strategies of how we've decided on what the alternates are, is that they're discrete and could be added later.
Thanks. And then this is what we refer to as the big enchilada. And it does, you didn't approve this year. It's coming next year, March 24th of 2023. But the 2 big alternates there are premium ceilings and upgraded stair railings. And those 2 pieces are not as easy, or I would say they're very difficult to add later. These can all be added later to this package. Whatever ceilings you go with on bid day, that's what you're going to get.
So the premium ceilings, and you won't see them in the pictures today, but this is like a normal ceiling, what you would get. A premium ceiling, especially when you have a big open room with a bunch of police officers that are talking in cubicles and things like that. There's some noise dampering material, and you can have some pretty cool undulation or wood on the top. I mean, it would really change the feel of a room, but it's not necessary to have. I mean, we certainly don't have it here.
So this is, the benefits of this incremental approach are it allows us to capture the most value, maintain the schedule, and deliver when we said we would. And it gradually sheds risk.
Can you talk about how contingency works and how you can shed risk and then use that contingency as we get further into the construction process?
Sure, so, on bid day, when we reduced the pre-construction contingency to 0, when we come here, there will be no pre-construction contingency. We also have points in the project in which we there's 3 big risk points. One is when you get the slab poured and you're even with the ground. We have a bunch of construction contingency, right? They'll stay in the GMP even up to the point of notice to proceed. And then we hold that in reserve until top of slab is poured and all of our subsurface risk is done. Then when the building is dried in, and we release about 1/3 of that to the team for other similar alternates that are later in the project, IT, security, FF&E, those kinds of things. Then when the building is dried in and we're weather tight, that's the second third of contingency. We're no longer exposed to weather, so we're in charge of our own destiny. And then we release another third. And when they're putting paint on the walls, we know that we have gotten rid of almost all the construction risk. And then we release the last third to the owner. And what we do with that money is entirely up to the CMO's office. But we will have a plan and incremental priorities that will be put together by police and fire. And we'll buy down that list so that at the end of the day, everything that we have in the budget will be spent on public safety, operational effectiveness, safety, quality, and durability.
Remember, the CMAR journey is very different than a typical design competitive sealed bid. All best efforts, but you have designers and hopefully there's cost estimation, but a competitive sealed bid, you don't really know until bid day when they come in. This happens every week in engineering. It's generally over our budget, but CMAR process is, you know it now with estimation versus design in real time. This is a similar, but we didn't have the escalation during Thrive, but at one point in Thrive, there was no parking lot. It was patched up what we had, no bioswales, anything. No Northeast Plaza, no retaining wall with Louisville on it. We were down to no gym at one point. One slide and very little, but as time came through with the CMAR process, like a roller coaster through time, we were able to add and release those funds. We ended up building the whole enchilada. We didn't have the escalation piece, but there was a time for about a month or two that we were bare bones. We didn't have any of it. We were hoping through time we could build, but we ended up building it all. The escalation is very different, but the good news about using a CMAR approach is you're identifying that as you design, instead of hoping is not a strategy. Put it out to bid, they come in way over. As Chris said, I hope he is wrong, but we don't know what the world will look like, let alone next month, but next March or next fall. This is a long build, so this is our approach. I think we're doing the prudent thing and showing the journey to date. What you will see today is not exactly what we hope we can afford that, but hope's not a strategy, but that's where we are. But again, we've been through a similar journey with Thrive. It worked out. It just was a little bit different than in that time frame. Wasn't during construction because we had COVID and everything else.
So we're not really asking any decision from council right now. It's going to be when we have those large GMPs that come in, we'll be making those decisions. And obviously, when you start giving that next one on the parking structure, that's when you're really committing to doing, I mean, we're putting a lot of money into something at that point. But we did want to make sure that you guys know where we are headed. So with that, if we can move on, unless there's any questions on this, we can go to the next slide.
I think the key is understanding the potential impacts to out-year budgets.
Yeah. We're trying to, minimize the impact and make sure we have full information as we go along before we start, jumping into the details. Okay, so we wanted to go through building renderings, and I'm going to give this to Steve.
So we have some updates on the renderings as more fun than what we just talked about, but a little bit, it's still very similar to what you saw before, but we've got a little bit greater quality renderings and a few things to look at and make maybe a decision on today. So this is from the front corner out at the southeast corner of the site, looking in at the building and having we feel like it should be a relatively low monument sign at the corner. We wanted this to be inviting to the public and to really be, really signify, this is the city of Louisville, and to be a bold statement there. So the three flags also help to anchor this as the entry. We heard last time you wanted to see those in the rendering, so here it is. There's a potential for there to be an art component. That's just a placeholder right now, not necessarily a bird, but that's just kind of taken from your purple mark, just as a placeholder. May not look anything like that, probably won't.
No, I already glommed onto it. I already saw it. Quick question. There was a drawing at some point where we had pass-through for vehicles, and I'm not seeing that in this rendering.
Yeah, so this passes through for vehicles right here, and it still does.
Okay.
There are some removable bollards that we're showing rendered here in this space, and that is to give us an ability to use this more like a big open plaza for retirements or whatever it is, some type of function that's going to go out and be visible to the public. We wanted that transparency of the departments.
But during the day-to-day operation of the building, those
During the
bollards would
day-to-day,
be...
those bollards would be removed. So
Okay.
only during a relatively rare occasion would you bollard that off and expand your plaza out to the corner. So
Okay, thank you.
that's the general idea, but it has some of that enhanced concrete finishes that come across that would help slow down traffic through that corner as well, just naturally.
It's a large area. You are seeing the landscape component in. We are scrubbing that design versus cost, so that process has started. We're trying to get bioswales here so that the landscaping strip to the left, moving over here, it won't work on that glass, Stephen, but
Okay.
there's bioswales and some really neat things that are going on here. The concrete blocks are aesthetic decorative seats, but they're also designed for security as well. They will be placed strategically to avoid drive-in vehicles to get into the building or to do anything. It is a large area. It does feed the two walks from the corner of Valley Parkway and 1171. And so we're excited about the landscaping and the different initiatives and the plantings that make sense. But with the colors of the building and everything that frames the campus to try to pop this site to the community, and with you want to talk about the stone or the pavers here, the different colors, in lieu of a red fire lane through there, our fire marshal has agreed we can have different markings, but have that as an aesthetically pleasing plaza on the times that we want a ceremony here to put the bollards, but it won't be a municipal looking pass through. I don't mean that disrespectful, I'm just saying those are kind of boring. So we're trying to do something neat here in this plaza area.
Has some landscaping elements that kind of are reminiscent of what you have in Thrive and here across the street.
Yeah.
Kind of starts tying that in as a city image of what your parking and your plazas look like. Another thing is we've reduced, essentially it's a roof monitor. It was our lantern that we talked about last time. That is smaller than it used to be, and because it's smaller, you won't see it as much. This view is a little bit above eye level from the corner, so you're seeing a little bit more than you actually would see it from ground level. And since we've reduced that, in keeping with our theme of having a beacon and a lantern towards the community, we are going to be lighting this feature wall, and there's we've talked a lot about what goes on that. There's some badges for police and fire, kind of helps orient where those are on the second floor as well, and signage. So that'll be a very nice backlit kind of beacon to the community. We mirrored that a little bit. You'll see a little coming up with the fire station side of things. So this is one of two options. I'm going to show you a double version of quite a few of the images. This one has the wood look soffit that we talked about before, and the next one I'm going to show you has essentially the same, but with the trellis look. So we would like to try and make a decision on which one of those that we prefer. So that's our goal. But either one is very handsome, in my opinion. The design team has a slight favorite, another DAG team has a slight favorite, we all had a slight favorite last time. So it's very aesthetically pleasing either way. And
And
this,
you compare the two screens too, because they're different looks if you look at that screen versus this one, so it's all in the rendering and the artwork again. It's
That looks better.
Oh.
Yeah, it gives you more definition, but again, it's like picking out a TV. But anyway, they're different, so kind of bounce between the two as we did to kind of get an idea of what you're actually looking at with everything working together.
The estimating team has a favorite too.
When we get to the end, we do want to talk about some of the just identified pros and cons of each, like one is the cost, one is maintenance and things like that, and we'll have the experts, and then you guys can have your full decision that you want to make on it.
So
Direction.
the
not-
trellis is what's in the numbers that you saw earlier. The wood look soffit is under $500,000, but let's just use 500,000 because that's a good benchmark, more than the ask that we had on the financial screens. So, and I think on the life cycle cost side of the piece, there is some concerns on the trellis about exactly how we would keep, there are a lot of mechanisms for keeping birds off the trellis, but none of them are 100% guaranteed. So you would have some maintenance on that trellis that you would not have on the wood look.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I captured.
Yeah.
Are you saying the wood,
trellis-
hold on. Are you saying that the wood look trellis is 500,000 more than this style?
The word trellis applies to this
I'm sorry,
picture.
the
wood
wood
look
soffit
right?
is
Yes,
500
sir.
more, but you're also saying that the trellis has more potential maintenance issues?
Yes, and
Okay.
is that a power washer on a lift? You know, it's not a
But we
huge
could
expense.
save $500,000 by going with the other one. And
I
that
would
would be-
use the words cost avoidance, not savings,
Yeah.
right? Because you're avoiding additional cost. I hate to be so OCD, but that's what I do for a living.
No, appreciate that, thank you. I don't want to call it saving either, because that's
Yeah.
what happens when I get presented something from my kids, and look, Dad, if you
It's
spend
just
money,
that
you
cost
save.
difference.
It's like, no, that's not how that works.
Yeah, so
Right.
basically he's saying,
It's a
like,
cost
if we have
difference.
let's say we have a 15 million bogey on this, then it would be a 500,000 addition
50,
to that.
yeah, 50.5,
To go with the wood.
to go with the wood.
To go with the wood.
Well, it makes that easy.
Yeah, makes that easy for me too.
so moving in a little bit, I'm seeing it from more of a ground perspective.
Without the flags.
In front of the flags, right? So this is from a little bit further in, from an eye level perspective.
Yeah.
Looking in at the front door. And then with the wood look, with the trellis. And looking at it from the front parking, kind of straight in at the entry, you can see a little better the badges and so forth and the signage. It shows up a little better, that one's a little brighter than this one. And then with the trellis.
Okay, so when you talk about what you have to do on the trellis though, to like for the birds, are you talking about like you're gonna have to put the spikes on there?
That's
And are you gonna see those?
the architect, the principal in charge of the firm that Stephen works for, said there are 2 or 3 other less visible and equally effective methods for keeping birds off that. And he hasn't gone into any detail, but is it low voltage wiring? Is it, I'm not sure what they are, but we brought up this exact issue about the bird spikes. And I think the answer is we have some options, but we've all been very clear that nothing is gonna keep those birds off there 100%. We can reduce it by 90%, but occasionally you're gonna get some.
Okay, but do we have one of these measures you're talking about, is the cost already in there?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, cost is already in there for
for the preventative measure, but the maintenance is not.
maintenance. No, this is a first cost budget only.
So the spikes are in there, in the cost, or
Not
what?
spikes, we have an allowance. Justin Bird and I worked up something that's more than the spikes, and let's just say we're confident it's adequate. So, you know, is the maintenance cost $5,000 a year? Is it $10,000? Those are the kinds of numbers you're talking about.
That's kind of like, yeah, so that's kind of what I'm asking as well, is, you know, I realize that the wood is $500,000 more, but how long is it gonna take us to get there with the maintenance costs? I mean,
Well, the way that you would do that math is the net present value, and let's just say you took $500,000 and you put it in the bank, then you would look at the time value of money and say it was 3%, you know, then would it spin off that 500,000? Would it spin off enough to maintain this? Yes, and remember, your windows are not going to look like that after. You have to wash the windows every month anyway. You're going to have to power wash the brick and stone. I mean, this building has a very large maintenance budget, and you would be increasing it. But one way to think about it is, what does $500,000 spin off in terms of over 30 or 40 or 50 years? How much money would you accrue? And in an inflationary environment, that becomes a dangerous game too, because if you're getting 3% interest and inflation's running at 9% or 10, you know, so that's why we're in front of you to make the decision tonight, is that you are.
I mean, are we gonna have to hire people to maintain this
I
facility?
mean, a lot of this is just unknown. I mean, there may be no bird issue, there may be a lot of bird issues, you know, and so some of this is a gamble with regard to what that extent is. I mean, if we have birds roosting up there all the time, I mean, yeah, we're probably, I mean, Kelly's here, we probably would have to have people pressure washing and more than we have capacity to do right now, and all that type of stuff. Now, and it all depends on what kind of system that Chris is programmed in. He's saying it's going to be effective. Or the architect picks. They're saying it's going to be effective,
So we have
so.
those little crows that are actually the water lot, just have a whole bunch of those.
Well, I
Well,
mean,
the jokes that we've made so far have been, Eric, so we can get those fiberglass owls, right?
Yep.
And the other joke that's been made is we do have an armory
Yeah, sure.
in this facility with
Sure.
highly trained officers.
It's a matter of time.
Target shooting day.
Okay, all right.
Hold on just one second, we'll let Councilmember Kelly come in.
Still need me?
Yeah, started.
All right.
Another view from around the corner looking at the entry doors, down that, along the woodwork wall. And then with the trellis. So you can see here that the trellis has got more of an overhang. And that would look, kind of the easiest way to see that from as well as perspective views. Another thing I could note that we've done as a cost-cutting measure is the amount of glass.
A little louder, Steve.
The amount of glass on the front of the facility has reduced. Before, that glass came down to the bottom of where the metal panels are. So every glass came down lower, and that's all level. It was level 5. We've reduced it to level 3 ballistic glass. So that's a significant cost savings that we've.
Well, that'll help with
What's the
birds.
difference between 3 and 5?
Level 3 will stop handgun.
Birds, it is.
Level 3 will.
Level 3 will stop handgun. Level 5 will stop long arm rifle.
I would go further than that and say that level 3 will stop. Level 3 will stop one shot, and if you get multiple shots in the same hole, it will fail. but level 5 is much more resistant to multiple shots. And the discussions that I'm no expert, but the discussions I've heard are that nothing is guaranteed to not fail eventually.
Well, how much, what is the cost difference between level 3 and level 5? Is it 500,000?
Well, no, it's like, it's $250 a square foot or more, a square foot. The glass is 4 inches thick, so it's 4 inches thick for level 5 and 2 inches is done. Wertzberger
Right
here.
behind you.
Done. This is your field of expertise. Come on, get up there. Stand up, come on. This is a great question for you. He's our public safety expert.
So a level 3 is about 1 1/4 inch thick, and this will be on an insulated, assembly, because it's exterior. And then level 5 jumps up to about 2 1/4 inches thick of just pure material. And, I'm working on 12 different police projects throughout the Metroplex. I have some agencies that are doing 0 along that wall to the public, and I have others that, a few that go to level 5. I thought from our work session last week, we struck a good balance of raising the windows up and the windows to a level 3. As Chris said, a shot across the street with a long arm is going to hit that. It's going to stop it. It's when comes that shot 3, 4, 5, 6 in the same tight zone, which doesn't always happen. And at least it'll alert staff immediately to hit the floor or vacate that space along the front.
And that's at that higher level. We're not talking about first floor. First floor is still level 5.
This
First
discussion,
floor has also gone to level 3, but
Yes.
it's at an interior side of the building. So our secure line is not the glass out here. There's a large amount of glass at the
Yeah.
entry.
correct.
So to reduce the cost, keep the cost under control for that, we've put our secure line inside the building.
I got it.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Is this just for this building, or does it also, we're also talking about the fire building?
No, the fire station does not have ballistic glazing in it.
Nobody wants to shoot a fireman.
Now,
Nobody shoot. Well, let's just say this. The other point I want to make to your question, the trellis and wood look soffit, that 500,000, buys them at both buildings. So you're not going to do different at each building, right? So that number is comprehensive, so when you start getting to the next building, I know I'll get the question, hey, does that 500,000 cover fire too? And it does.
You can see a little bit of that other trellis down here. We're going to move down that direction.
So we have about 15 minutes left, so we're going to have to flip through
So I'll go through these a little faster. So here we are at the fire station. This is an element that you had not seen before. That's an enclosure for our backup generator that we talked about earlier. There's also some HVAC that needs to be storm protected as well for those critical functions. And then just get the trellis on the fire station apparatus base. And then another view that kind of looks back and shows you that new element of the trellis. And looking a little bit further away, this is the entry to the fire station, and we feel like that's become a very handsome element. There's some change in grade that occurs along that edge, and take advantage of that to give us a very nice looking entry for the fire station. Straight on look at it. In the background you can see what that garage looks like without the
wrap.
Without the wrap on it. And then another updated view of our courtyard. This is the staff courtyard inside, and so it's got a screen, between the workout zone and there's a fence and the more kind of eating and hangout zone. So we kind of separate those two functions. That's the end of that.
I think you have a few more.
I finally figured out what
a few
that
more.
trellis
So-
reminded me of.
Show them.
Yeah, we showed the
You want to go and
outside.
show those?
Yeah, go ahead. So we did want to show you guys the exterior, what that wrap fabric would look like. This is going to be an alternate, but we did want you to see how it changes that structure significantly, if you want to flip through some of those.
And the faceted, look kind of mirrors some things that are going on at Fairgreen as well, so it kind of helps tie the campus together as well, even though it's in a different.
This material is long-lasting, there's some movement, can be added later, but what it does is obstruct the view of someone seeing in, so there's an added level of security there by visual. It's not ballistic, but it's visual. Does several things.
And it's kind of moving around. This is, it may not say property in evidence, we're debating that, but this is where that entry is for the public. And that's the ramp up into the.
This will be your view that's in the back parking lot now, by the library, outside the large parking area, looking back toward the building as this is the back side of Valley Parkway. You'd be looking at Valley Parkway, but in the big parking lot looking east.
Go to the next one. Okay, so before we get into parking and construction, I think the most important thing, because we can always come back after the meeting and do parking and construction updates, is do you guys have a preference on, or thoughts on the trellis versus?
So I want to kick that off because I've got a small bit of reference, because I know the trellis is kind of the leader, and I want to tell you that there's a couple of reasons why I think that's an interesting idea. The first is because the bars, the stripes of the trellis, I think really are representative of police, that we should have bars and things that make people remember jails and that type of stuff. So that's number one. Number two, the birds that are going to live on there, I think if we put those bird structures up there to resist, I think that's great because it's going to look like a cactus. So it's going to remind me of my hometown as well. So I think that's important. And then I think it also, with those birds, and I don't know if you guys have seen the amount of grackles that show up over in the Walmart parking lot, but the reflective surface that those birds create, the amount of white material on the ground, is really going to radiate the heat out and probably reduce our energy costs. So I think the trellis is a great idea.
I'm not quite sure what you're trying to say.
So those are my sarcastic yet I think, folks, if we're gonna build a building and we're gonna put that down there, yeah, I mean, $500,000 is $500,000, but we're talking about a $111 million facility, and if we're constantly having to scrub it down because of birds, and if we're constantly having to deal with nitpicking, that kind of stuff, it just doesn't put the quality on the ground that I think we deserve. So that's all I have to say about that.
Well, I was going to say something similar because, I was just telling Claire my thoughts about maintenance. I feel like it would be very short-sighted of us to go into something that's, going to save us $500,000, but it's going to be a pain in the rear for the next 30, 40, 50 years for us to maintain. So I think I would rather go with the wood as well.
Well, I guess I'll be the accountant in the.
And I love you for that, I do.
What's the percentage of $500,000 over $111 million?
Yeah, but so it took me a while to I'm like, that trellis, I've seen it somewhere before, and I just.
He likes
it
to
just
show
I've been to the Windspear, and it's a lot bigger.
Oh, remind us of Dallas, that's perfect.
I'm not gonna get to that, but I will say, having been out there many times, you don't see any of those things that you're talking about. Now, maybe they're doing something special, maybe they have somebody that scrubbed it every day, I don't know. But you don't necessarily see those things. All things being even, if we did not have all these price escalations, I wouldn't care. $500,000 wouldn't be that big deal if we weren't on top of what we're already on top of and what's coming. Until we get to that GMP, nothing's locked in.
Yeah.
So if neither look, I'm not an architect, and normally I go out whatever Christian says when it comes to architecture. With this one, let's save ourselves a little bit of money if we can. But I'm not going to go crazy if everybody goes another way. But I've given my 2 cents, and I'll never come off my soapbox.
That's fair.
Go ahead.
Not sure. I would go with the wood.
you have a dissertation?
Yeah.
Come on, I set the ground, you're welcome.
As much as I love the trellis idea, because that's definitely what I would pick, I hate pigeons, so I would, but is there any kind of in-between? Can you get that look without having that open up there? Is there any way to do something?
Well, if you're gonna do some trellis and some wood look, I mean, the wood look's already there as kind of the, on the cost element, and then you're just adding some trellis on top of that, which brings, you know, a lesser amount of birds back in, so.
I do like the photo you showed of the fire department side of the wood. I think that probably is my favorite.
That's my favorite elevation right
I
there.
think I love that right there. That's definitely, that's why it would be preferential to the wood, and also the kind of the look, this glass, aluminum, wood look, you know, that's on that fire department side too, so. But I think I would go with the wood.
I like the trellis, but I don't like it as much as Mayor Pearson. I like the trellis. I would say I'm 55% trellis, 45% wood. So I wouldn't lose any sleep over either direction, frankly.
See, I'm naturally just a compromising person.
I've heard that.
Oh man, hold on, I got my zip belt on.
Wood's fine with me. When, I like the trellis.
I think,
And I like the wood.
I think they're
And I like the trellis.
both great
I like
options.
the wood.
I mean, from a looks perspective, that just, if we have to come back to it as an alternative, you know, because we're finding that the numbers just aren't gonna pencil.
So we want to go with wood and leave
But I'm hearing consensus
trellis
on the wood.
as
Well, I mean,
alternative?
so I used to work in a corner office that had a balcony and it had a trellis. And I mean, we had hawks that were building nests up there.
Hawks.
Hawks.
You can't kill them, you
I thought
can't
you
shoot
said
them.
hogs there for a second. I'm like, man, those pigs get up
Yeah, all the way
everywhere.
up. But we had hawks up there and like there were constantly, there were birds building nests up there and then all the nests would fall through and.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
You got big dogs.
Okay, so we can leave it all.
Yeah, we got about 8 minutes left, so I think
We're
wood.
because we can't do it. We can't do it.
we can put a bow on this and.
Okay, I think I know where we should head for the materials at this point, and so we can come back for the parking.
We'll come back for the parking and construction phasing. Okay, super. Well, we are going to go ahead and adjourn from the workshop, and we will reconvene in the meeting at 7 p.m.
Is it hawk specific or is it nature?
And I give like
All things.
kind of friendly.
It is 7 p.m. on September 19th, and I call this regular session of the Louisville City Council to order. We do have a quorum. Tonight, I will be leading things off with an invocation, so if you could please join me in a moment of silent contemplation. Amen.
Amen.
Councilmember Green?
Please join me in the pledge to the American and Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
All right, I am going to be performing a little executive privilege, and we're going to take the last item on the agenda, item F11, and we're going to move that up to the front of the agenda, please. So item 11, consideration of naming the new Public Safety Center, the Tittle McFadden Public Safety Center, in honor of former Fire Chief Timothy Tittle and former Police Chief Steve McFadden. The city is proposing a new public safety center that will combine the central fire station, fire administration, police station, and emergency management into one shared facility that will be approximately 116,000 square feet in size. A large parking garage will also be included in this expansion project. This project will be essentially configured in the same location and expanded to include the PNC Bank site. Staff proposes naming the complex the Tittle McFadden Public Safety Center in honor of the former Fire Chief Timothy Tittle and former Police Chief Steve McFadden in recognition of their contributions to the city. And it is recommended that the council approve the naming of this new facility as set forth. I need to please have both Police Chief Deaver and Fire Chief McNeil, along with any family members they may wish to come up to the front. Chief, you guys have a few words you would like to say? Or somebody from the families? Come on.
That's everybody. Well, when it comes to the naming of this new joint public safety building, I don't believe the city could do any better than these two men. I'm proud to be able to sit up here and talk about Chief Tittle just a minute. I could probably end this with saying class of 1974. So any of you that have been around town, we got a whole row of them back here. If you've been around very long, you've heard people talk about the class of 1974 and all the accolades and everything they've done. And whether you believe it or not, or you think it's been maybe exaggerated, there's no denying there's been some good people come out of that class. And they've done a lot for this city and really poured into this community. And Chief Tittle was one of those guys. He graduated in 1974, spent a little time in college, came back and was hired in October of 1977 with the Louisville Fire Department. He was just a hometown boy. He loved Louisville. Tenure alone, he did little over 42 years with the department. Had his life not been cut short, he was hoping to get right at that 43 mark. He was going to retire in the fall of 2020. Didn't quite make it to there, but over 42 years. But tenure alone doesn't make you worthy of this naming. It's what you do with that time. And Chief Tittle did a lot with that time, that 42 years that he was here. He poured himself into this job, and he loved it. Nobody's perfect, but he did his best. He always had the department, the city, his best interest in mind, and did what he thought was best. He loved the guys, and every position that he held, he poured himself into it. If you looked at his car, you looked at his lawn, you looked at his desk, you knew that organization was one of his things. And so it just made him good at the job. He was loyal to the department and the city and who he worked for, and he was organized and really did a great job. And it helped him promote up through the ranks until he was appointed chief in 2011. Not only was he a great employee, but Tim was a good man. As you can see by the family and the friends out here that support him, he comes from a good family. He has good friends. He was well-liked and well-respected. And that's one of the things we look for, just good people. I'm proud to see the city looking at this and voting to take this measure, and glad to represent him.
And I could just say ditto. I mean, because Chief McFadden, outstanding man. He served the city of Louisville for 29 years, from November 77 until his retirement, February 2007. At the time of his retirement, I believe he was the longest serving police chief in the state of Texas, and I think probably the nation at the time. In his capacity, he led a department through a growth period that we have never seen. The population increased from 22,000 to almost 90,000. You have to be a progressive leader to do that. During that time, the police department went from 33 employees to over 190. He holds a Master of Science degrees from the University of North Texas and East Texas State University, and he's a 1976 graduate of the FBI National Academy. Chief McFadden, we call him Big Chief. So that's the way I refer to you the rest of this. Big Chief had a reputation not only within the department, but across the state. Many police chiefs respected him for his work, his progressive leadership. He did so many things. He started the Citizens Police Academy here. He started youth offender program. At the time that both of those were started, they were in their infancy, that not many police departments, I see Commissioner Mitchell shaking her head, not many police departments had those at the time. He was part of the Texas Police Chief Strategic Planning Committee for several years, involved in the community in so many ways. He was past president of the Louisville Kiwanis Club and served on many executive and advisory boards during his time. He was also the founding member of the Greater Louisville Youth and Family Services. I can't imagine a person more deserving than Big Chief for this naming. Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Absolutely.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Tittle, and I am the wife of Chief Tim Tittle. It is with great pride, pleasure, and honor that I'm able to stand before you and express our collective gratitude for the entire Tittle family. I'll try to keep this brief. Those that know me know that I'm a pretty tender-hearted and emotional person, and I want to spare you all a bunch of tears. So, to say the tribute of honoring our Tim by displaying his name on a public building, the fire department of Louisville, is a true honor for our family. It doesn't seem to be enough. What a beautiful way to reflect the care, honor, and respect our city shows for its public servants, one of its own. To our family, Chief Tittle was simply Tim. He was a son, a brother, a husband, a father, coach, and grandpa. He was a friend, a neighbor, an active community citizen, and a faithful servant of God. To the citizens of Louisville, he was also a friend, a protector, a caring soul that appeared during some of our residents' most dreadful moments of need. Some of you know Chief Tittle pondered the idea of becoming a fireman back when he was in high school, right across the street from Central Station. Other than his two sons, nothing made him happier than to become a fireman and work his way up through the ranks of Louisville Fire Department. He loved the fire service. He loved the citizens of Louisville. He took great pride in stressing who he worked for, the citizens of this city. He never lost sight of that. He was passionate about serving his community. At any opportunity, he stressed this to the men and women under his command. He also stressed this as a life lesson to his two sons. I can imagine Chief Tittle would be a bit shy at receiving such recognition, as he was not one to serve for purpose of accolades. But I know he would be so tremendously humbled and honored that his people cared and supported him enough to publicly recognize him. It would mean the world to Tim, the man. It means the world to the Tittle family. In honoring Chief Tim Tittle, you also honor a family that is from here. Tim's mother, Laverne, was born and raised here in Louisville, as was Tim and his brothers and sisters. His family has remained in this area, growing up, loving, and supporting the community that Tim loved and served. My heartfelt appreciation goes to all that have had any part of honoring our Tim. Thank you to our fire family, the city council, city leaders, and the citizens of Louisville. Thank you.
So
So my grandpa didn't know this was happening. And by the way, lying to a human lie detector is not easy. He thought we were coming for Caden to get an award. But I want to make sure that I speak for our family and just say thank you, because growing up in the police department, and when I say I grew up in the police department, I was in that department like a week old. And when my grandpa retired, I was in college. So I literally grew up in the department, volunteered, I think forcefully volunteered a lot in the summers. But this community means so much to our family, and I think it's amazing. When I found out they were doing this, I got a call, and it meant a lot, because for my grandpa, I know sometimes, when you leave a department in a city, you think people are going to forget you. So for him, this is a way for him to know he's not forgotten. And for it to be with Chief Tittle is even more important, because he was an amazing man to our family as well, and meant a lot to us. And I was like, I haven't seen her since his funeral. So it's such an honor, because those are two wonderful men who did so much for this city and put their hearts in every single day. And I think that to honor them in this way is just an amazing thing.
Anyone else? All right. So I think I'll speak for most of the elected officials that I know in this room, if not all of them. It is not often that we get the opportunity to really praise and honor those folks who build community day in and day out. Sometimes to the detriment of their families. They are here. And they build what we live in. So when people talk about the city, when people talk about the whatever, they're talking about guys like this. And we are so proud to at least have the opportunity to know these folks and what they do and stand on their shoulders as we move forward, because the culture is built 20 years ago. And with that, council, I will entertain a motion to approve the naming of the new public safety facility as set forth in the caption.
I move to name the Public Safety Center the Tittle McFadden Public Safety Center.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Council, if you please vote. It happens unanimously. Y'all aren't going to stay for the rest of the fun? Have a great evening. Thank you for being here.
Boy, that felt good.
Right? All right, we're going to move on to item C, public hearing. 1, public hearing, consideration of a resolution authorizing the adoption of the 2022 Assessment of Fair Housing. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development requires jurisdictions receiving CDBG and other HUD funding to perform an assessment of fair housing. The Assessment of Fair Housing is a snapshot of housing and demographic patterns in Louisville, with the most recent data coming from the 2013-2017 American Community Survey. It provides a geographic analysis of racially concentrated poverty, housing segregation patterns, disparities in access to opportunity, disproportionate housing needs, and disparities and disability access. It also analyzes mortgage loan disclosure data and fair housing complaints. The plan will fulfill part of recommendation number 19 of the Listen, Learn, Lead report. This plan supports the consolidated plan that was approved by City Council on August 1st, 2022. Also, the housing strategy plan will utilize data pulled for the AFH and the goals to determine what affordable housing looks like in Louisville. The document was published on August 19th, 2022 for a 30-day public review period that will close after this public hearing on September 19th, 2022. A survey was also made available on the city's website and was open until July 31st, 2022. It is recommended that the City Council approve the resolution as set forth in the caption above. We do have Ms. Maureen Milligan, the National Development Council, available to present some information, present the information.
Good evening, happy to be back. I was before you about a month ago when we were discussing the consolidated plan. And so the assessment of fair housing is a related document that the city is required to adopt as part of its fair housing planning related to the acceptance of federal funds. So I just need to get my presentation.
There we go.
There we go. And this will be more brief than the discussion we had about the consolidated plan, but we'll talk a little bit about the purpose of the assessment of fair housing, review just some examples, some of the data that we collected, and then review the goals that have been set as a part of the AFH. So the Fair Housing Act of 1968 prohibited the discrimination in the sale, rental, or financing of housing as it relates to members of protected classes. So if you look on the left-hand side of this slide, the protected classes are race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. So that the Fair Housing Act prevents discrimination, both public and private discrimination. But then if a city is a recipient of federal funding, it has a duty to not only not discriminate, but to take steps to affirmatively further fair housing. And HUD is the agency that's responsible for enforcing the Fair Housing Act. And so HUD has set forth a definition of what affirmatively furthering fair housing means. And so if you look at the graphics that are in the middle of the slide, some of those steps are addressing significant disparities in housing needs, addressing significant disparities in access to opportunity. So that can include, because our neighborhood impacts other opportunities, our access to jobs, our access to transportation, our access to good jobs. That's something that we'll look at when we're looking at accessing fair housing opportunities for all members of protected classes. Also, when we're thinking about affirmatively furthering fair housing, we're looking at replacing areas that have become segregated based on race, socioeconomic status, or ethnicity, and then also transforming those areas so that they can become areas of opportunity. So looking at ways that families can have the ability to be mobile and to move into areas of opportunity and to also create more areas of opportunity. And then maintaining compliance with the fair housing law. So if we think about the fair housing planning process, the city chose to plan for the consolidated plan and the assessment of fair housing in parallel. So the community meetings that we discussed in the last presentation were also the meetings that helped us gather data and feedback related to the assessment of fair housing. We also gathered additional data related to protected classes and how they're affected in the city of Louisville. And then we identified factors that contribute to their fair housing access. And then just like we did with the consolidated plan, we're proposing goals that the city would seek to achieve. So when we think about factors that contribute to fair housing access, there's both public actions as well as private actions that can affect a family's access to housing. So for example, public action could include zoning and land use laws that prohibit the development of housing in certain areas, as well as investments in neighborhoods, especially if those neighborhoods have higher percentages of persons who are members of protected classes. Private discrimination or private actions could include realtors who steer families into or out of certain neighborhoods based on assumptions about race or ethnicity or socioeconomic status. And so I shared this slide in the last presentation, and I'm just sharing it again to highlight the diversity of the city of Louisville. And so when we were looking at fair housing issues, we were looking from a geographic standpoint, are there areas in the city where there is an overrepresentation of one racial or ethnic group versus another? And we also looked at disability and disability status. Are there areas of the city where more persons with disabilities live, and how is that impacting whether they have access to opportunity? So, while it's not shown in this slide, in the city of Louisville, about 9% of residents have some form of a disability. That's slightly lower than the state average, which is closer to 11%. But you can see, if we're comparing Louisville to the DFW region, when we're thinking about our older adults, there is higher percentages in Louisville of older adults that have disabilities. I also shared these slides in the con plan presentation. When we're thinking about accessing housing, certainly the ability to pay for housing is very, very important. And in the consolidated plan, we looked at broad data, just related to cost burdens, and not looking at whether the person was a member of a protected class. But when we're looking at data related to race, the city's median income is about $67,000. But if we look at the median income for white households, that median household income is closer to $73,000. When we look at black households, that median income is almost $15,000 less at $56,000. And then Hispanic households at $60,000. And so if we think of those lower incomes, that makes households more vulnerable to economic pressures related to housing, and so that does impact their ability to access housing. Also, if we look at disabled households, or a household that has a disabled member, almost 14% of those households live in poverty compared to 8% of households that do not have a disabled member. And so again, these then affect persons who become a housing cost burden, because certainly your income affects your ability to pay for housing. One thing that HUD asked us to look at is whether there are any racially or ethnically concentrated areas of poverty. And so HUD defines those areas as having a census tract that has more than 50% of persons who are not white and more than 40% of persons who are living in poverty. So you can see this is a blown up map of the region, and the areas that look like lakes are actually recaps. And so those are racially or ethnically concentrated areas of poverty. You can see that there are numerous areas in both Fort Worth and Dallas, as well as in Arlington. And there are some recaps that are starting to spread into the northern areas of DFW, but none in Louisville. And really what came out of the assessment of fair housing is that Louisville is providing access to opportunity for members across protected classes. And so the real vulnerability is ensuring that access to opportunity is protected and continues. For example, this is a map that overlays poverty as well as non-white population. So the blue are areas that have more people in poverty, 30% or more people in poverty, and that cross-hatched areas have more than 50% of people of color. So you can see there are two areas that are at risk of becoming recaps in future versions of HUD's analysis of racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty. Certainly we talked a lot in the consolidated plan about the triangle and the low incomes, as well as the ethnic and the racial segregation that is occurring in the triangle. So another example of the analysis that we did was, where are people with disabilities living? And so you can see here again that the triangle has, if we're looking at elderly adults, more than 70% of elderly adults living in the triangle have a disability. And that's especially important and problematic because, as we know, the triangle has essentially no single family housing. So it's apartments, many of them that were built before the Fair Housing Act and other civil rights acts were enacted, as it relates to disabilities and disability access. If we're thinking about the Americans with Disabilities Act, a lot of those provisions didn't come into place until the mid-90s. And so, and these apartments are starting to age. So if we're thinking about people with disabilities, they may have numerous issues safely accessing their apartment because of either deferred maintenance issues or because the apartment was never accessible for people with disabilities in the first place. Something that certainly was mentioned in your last assessment of fair housing was finding ways to make the city more accessible to families that are using housing vouchers. So those vouchers can help overcome the issue of inability to pay, but you've got to find a landlord who's willing to accept those vouchers. So you can see all of the areas are grayed out, are areas that had either no acceptance of vouchers or so little that there was insufficient data to report. So there are very limited census tracts that actually have landlords that accept vouchers. And that was confirmed recently by the Inclusive Communities Project that did a survey of landlords just this year. And they surveyed, I believe, 7 landlords of apartment complexes, none of which accepted housing vouchers. The civil rights protections also relate to the financing of housing. And so another analysis that we look at is access to financial services. And so this map takes data from the state related to payday lenders and auto title lenders, who are alternative lenders who, in many instances, charge a much higher interest rate for their lending activities. And so those are the triangles that are in red. And so you can see that those alternative lenders, as compared to more traditional lenders, which are the green stars, are concentrated in South Business 121, which is where we have areas with lower incomes, as well as families that are more public transit dependent. So if they're going to go to a lender, they're likely going to go to a lender that they can walk to or easily get to. So it's something certainly for the city to look at in terms of a family having access to a traditional lender. So these were examples of data, really just to give you just a little bit to chew on in terms of what we looked at from the assessment of fair housing. And so we used all of this, both stakeholder feedback and the data, to identify what are potential factors that are contributing to fair housing issues. So you can see this is a long list, but to really just summarize it, many of the issues are related to housing access and housing affordability, including landlords accepting vouchers, but also just rising rents and home sales prices, pricing people of many, many incomes and races and ethnicities out of housing, but certainly those households that are more vulnerable because they have lower incomes. And then these final 2 slides are the goals that came out of the analysis of the data, the stakeholder feedback, and the contributing factors. Many of these goals are already incorporated into your consolidated plan, which is what's required in your fair housing, is that your consolidated plan and your assessment of fair housing really intersect and work together. And the broad, I would say, the broad themes in these goals are housing affordability, housing access, and mobility and transportation access. So there are goals that are related to preserving affordable housing, supporting high-quality transit-oriented new development, as well as working with realtors to help families purchase homes in the city of Louisville. And then if we think about transportation, it's continuing to build out complete streets that are safe to people regardless of what type of transportation they're using, whether it's a car or a bicycle or their own 2 feet. And then finding potential improvements in GoZone to make sure that GoZone is really accessible to people of various disabilities, as well as families and shift workers. And then the final big broad theme is collaboration. In your last assessment of housing, some of the comments you received on your assessment of fair housing is this need for regional collaboration because families move. And so just focusing on Louisville without thinking about broader dynamics in the region doesn't really help you achieve your goals. And so focusing on putting together a working group that's looking at housing access, and that includes everyone who is included in the real estate marketplace, which includes your landlords, as well as your housing voucher users and other individuals who are really impacted by housing affordability. So we have 5 goals on this slide, and then an additional 4 goals here related to, like I said, housing access, transportation, and collaboration. And that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Council?
Yeah, I have a question. I have actually a couple of questions that I jotted down as you were going through. So back on slide 10, and I hate to be that guy, but there's a green dog ear on one of the squares. I just wonder if there's significance to that. Keep going. Back. Give one more. Right there. Is there significance to that square? I'm just wondering what the green.
No, great question. I think sometimes if you don't change it to a number, it
So
didn't
maybe that's being
recognize
marked
it.
for a reason. And then if you go down a couple slides, keep going. Right here, there's a couple of these slides, they've got areas that are outlined in orange, but they don't have any color in them. So it doesn't mean there's no data. Does that mean it's meeting all criteria? What is that telling us about that slide, about that area?
So because of when the census data was collected and the boundaries of Louisville were expanded, those are not getting.
I think I asked the same question last time, got the
Well,
same answer.
you did not, but it's a great question to ask. So yes, the next consolidated plan will absolutely take all of that data in, but it wasn't collected in this one.
And then two more quick questions. Is there a universal definition of affordable? I've heard all kinds of definitions, and I hear this said over and over again. I've read 30% of income is affordable. Is that a standard definition or just something that's classically accepted?
It's something that's classically accepted. HUD uses it in their programs, so 30% of your gross income. But some programs also will take out utility. So you look at the utility costs, and that's added into your housing costs, and that should be 30% or less of your income.
Then one more quick question. We've heard a lot from a group here of seniors, and seniors are represented in this data because they're not a protected class per se, according to HUD. How do we get more information about senior affordability, expand this to talk more about senior living?
So you have, certainly you have census data. I was here the last presentation where the seniors were talking about their concerns. And in your future housing planning, that's something that you can definitely think about. You know, the problem that they're running into is even with HUD-funded subsidized programs, the landlord is allowed to increase rent. But obviously, if they're on a fixed income, their incomes are not rising. And so unlike the voucher program, and that's why we certainly highlight vouchers as part of your housing solution, because the voucher program is the one program where the household actually pays only 30% of their income on housing. Whereas in a program like Evergreen, a family has to qualify based on their income, but if their income drops, their rent does not drop. Or if the rent rises, their payment, they have to pay that payment regardless of whether they're on a fixed income. So certainly looking at fixed incomes and the solutions that help individuals on fixed incomes are part of some of your housing strategy. Vouchers can be one of them, but designing programs that recognize that fixed income issue is also another way you can help your elderly residents.
Thank you.
I had a comment and a question. So the slide where you were talking about the transportation, I love that that's in there because I'm always talking about how you can't talk about affordable housing without putting transportation as part of the conversation. Because I think if we can figure out how to move people without having to have a car, that frees up a lot of money to help them with their housing. So there was some stuff in here about DCTA Go Zone. I was just curious. I know there were some surveys that were done and some research. I was just curious because the Go Zone program is, I guess at this point, it is a year old at this point. But since it's so new, there's been so much, it's been dynamic, it's been changing. I was just kind of curious of what time frame is this snapshot of what we're seeing about DCTA Go Zone?
So we started our meetings with stakeholders probably in late May, early June, around the time that the survey was rolled out. And I will say we received less comments in the online survey, more comments on Go Zone from service providers that are working with low and moderate income families, and then as well as at some of the focus group meetings that we had. I think a lot of people recognized it was an early, it was a transition from fixed bus route to this new on-demand service. And so people recognized that this was a time to be giving comments because it's a perfect time to look operationally at how this first year went. But there was concern, I would say the biggest concern was just about communication. And certainly if you're talking about limited English proficiency populations or other populations that don't come to a city council meeting like that, finding ways to get information about the services and how to use the service, I think was probably the biggest theme that we heard from service providers.
Okay. Well, I think that's incredibly helpful information for us to take back to DCTA.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions?
Just glad we have this, this kicked off, we have this information, and like Patrick said, you know, we're working with the seniors over at Evergreen and probably other seniors who may be watching this. We are thinking about you, we are trying to figure it out. There is no fast solution. I know we've gotten United Way of Denton County involved to help out a little bit as well. So, you know, we're working as fast as we can. We're the government, we're a tugboat, not a speedboat. But thank you for this information.
Yeah, and Ms. Milligan, what I really appreciate is the timeliness of this information, because we're going to be rolling into our housing study that'll be starting here this next month or two. And so we're going to be able to take a really comprehensive data set along with Denton and their housing study to look at Denton County, at least the large urban sections of Denton County. And we're really excited about that opportunity and the vision. Maybe we can help us make these arguments at the state level. So I appreciate you. Thank you. Council, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Council, I need another motion to approve the resolution as set forth.
Move to approve the resolution as set forth in the caption.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Item 2, public hearing, consideration of the proposed tax rate for the 2022 tax year. In accordance with state law, a public hearing is being held on the proposed tax rate for the 2022 tax year. Section 26.05D of the Texas Property Tax Code requires a governing body to hold a public hearing to adopt a tax rate for the current tax year if the proposed tax rate exceeds the lower of the voter approval or no new revenue tax rate. The total tax rate proposed for fiscal year 2022-2023 of .443301 does not change from the current fiscal year tax rate, but does exceed the no new revenue rate of .396846 by 11.7%. The proposed total tax rate does not exceed the voter approval rate of .443943. The proposed tax rate was recommended by the City Council at the budget workshop held on August 6, 2022. An agenda item to adopt the 2022 tax rate is also on tonight's City Council meeting. It is recommended that the City Council conduct a public hearing. City Secretary, is there anyone here who is posted to speak?
No, sir, there's not.
All right. Council, I'll entertain a motion to close.
Move to close the public hearing. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, please vote. Public hearing is closed unanimously. Item D, Visitors Citizens Forum. Speakers must address their comments to the mayor rather than to individual council members or staff. Speakers should speak clearly and state their name and address prior to beginning their remarks. Speakers will be allowed 5 minutes for testimony. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, or slanderous remarks may be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistles, yells, clapping, and similar demonstrations will not be permitted. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, the City Council is restricted from discussing or taking action on items not listed on the agenda. Action can only be taken at a future meeting. I do have 2 requests to speak to the council. And my apologies if I get these wrong. I'm working off a handwriting here. So is Kashi Daniel? Or is it Daniel Kashi the other way around? Koshi? Please, if you would, please state your name and address for the record, and we're all ears.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Koshi Daniel, and I reside in 624 Mandalay Bay in the Meridian Complex. And the reason I came up here is because I'm aware of the proposed development at Pier 121. Marina, and I would like to say as a resident that is going to be extremely difficult on us. We were wondering if other plans could be made because this At this point, we have a park next to our residential area and the kind of like a buffer zone towards the lake. And the proposed RV park, cabins, lodges, and other developments that come up here would result in multiple people from different places coming in. And beside the fact that it is going to affect our property values, one of the greatest concerns I have personally is that we have a lot of children in the neighborhood. We use the park a lot as joggers use the park. And there's going to be a feeling of lack of security because the neighborhood is so close. I mean, the proposed development is so close to the neighborhood. And so I personally would be concerned about the safety of our children and the use of our parks and the neighborhood. Other things that have been my concern would be the noise in the neighborhood because of that, and the fact that we have, at this point, this green belt, or rather green zone between us and the lake, and that is going to be taken over, and that kind of disturbs us, the fact that that's going to happen. And also, the wildlife, the proximity to the wildlife we have there, all of that is affected. So I would like to request you, if the mayor, if this could be looked into. Thank you for this time.
Thank you, sir. And I have also Mr. Elliot Beard. Welcome back.
Yeah.
And name and address for the record.
Yep, you bet. William Elliott Beard, 620 Mandalay Bay Drive, also in the Meridian neighborhood. I know I've already bugged you guys once, but I've unwittingly become a bit of a spokesperson, and people have reached out to me who could not be here tonight and said, you know, could you speak on my behalf? I'm, of course, urging them to also reach out to y'all, so I acknowledge that this only goes so far. But Jason Nash from 1315 Charler Bay said he's concerned about the property value impact and wildlife habitat erosion. Other than the small area of Leela, our wildlife has very little area. We need a balance between development and conservation. Seems we are overemphasizing development at the expense of wildlife conservation. Rodney White, 629 Mandalay Bay Drive, is against the RV park. Then he caveated it with, unless we have a buffer, my biggest concern, the RV park is what concerns him the most, and the overnight activities it could bring. Conversationally with other people who did not reach out to me specifically with their name and address and say, please go on record, I hear that a lot. A lot of people are talking about day use okay, at night when teenagers who are staying there with their parents get bored and literally our backyards butt up against this, I'm concerned about safety, vandalism, etc. Teenagers shenanigans seems to come up a lot conversationally. And Jim Roberts, 2829 Elm Fork Drive. We're not interested in the project development for fear of declining property values due to it backing directly up against our community. Also, the nature preserve would be impacted, which is another downside. Specifically, he wanted to focus on the RV park and campsites. For my own part, as I continue to try to think about compromises and whatnot, and I apologize, I did not get my handouts done that I wanted to hand y'all. But
we always have email.
Say again? I will do an email, but real quick, since I have a couple minutes. Right off of 121, the access road that actually goes to the marina currently is Lake Park Road, and Memorial, which becomes Marina Vista, no, apologies, Lake something. Anyway, I always think of it as Memorial because that's what it is farther east-west. It's what leads to past our neighborhood, past Kings Grant, to that road. Well, the south side of that road is closed and always has been as long as I've lived there. I'm not sure why. It shows up on Google Maps, but that East Park Road continues south to 121. If that were reopened, reactivated as a road, to me that's a very basic infrastructure move that would relieve a huge burden off of the major thoroughfare, which is a very minor thoroughfare right next to our neighborhood. So I will indeed put it together and email y'all, but the south side of that road is currently not utilized, and it is still a road. It hasn't been maintained. But as another entry to the marina, I think that would be a huge solution to what a lot of people spoke about last week. RVs and all the people that already blow through our stop sign right next to our playground where my kids play as well. That is definitely a major concern. So all my concerns from last week are unchanged as well.
Super.
Thank y'all again.
Thank you. City Secretary, do we have any other speakers? No, sir, we do not. Mr. Daniel, Mr. Beard, I want to thank you. I know it's difficult to take time out to come, and I appreciate the feedback, the emails. I know that city staff has been working specifically with you, Mr. Beard, but if there are concerns, please continue to reach out, and we will make sure that you get to speak to the relevant experts within City Hall that can help hopefully mitigate some of the concerns. Appreciate you both. And tell your neighbors we don't bite. They can come out too. Item E, consent agenda. All of the following items on the consent agenda are considered to be self-explanatory by the council and will be enacted with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so request. For a citizen to request removal of an item, a speaker card or e-comment must be filled out and submitted to the city secretary. City secretary, do we have any speaker cards or e-comments?
No, sir, we do not.
Council, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. If you would please vote. Consent agenda passes unanimously. Item F, regular agenda. Consideration of an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2021-2022 adopted budget. The purpose of this ordinance is to amend the fiscal year 2021-22 adopted budget to include all supplements and changes approved by City Council throughout the year. A large percentage of these appropriations include items related to the annexation of Castle Hills. Appropriations also include the routine supplement completed each year for prior year encumbrances, purchases that overlap into the next fiscal year, as well as appropriations that correct year-end balances. It's recommended that the City Council approve the ordinances set forth in the caption above. Council, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the ordinances set forth in the caption.
Do I have a second?
Second.
City Attorney?
This is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Louisville, Texas, amending the previously adopted and approved budget ordinance for the fiscal year October 1st, 2021 to September 30th, 2022 by providing supplemental appropriations to the various funds, providing an effective date, and declaring an emergency.
Council, if you'd please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Item 8, consideration of an ordinance amending the fee schedule of the City of Louisville by amending fees related to administration, community relations and tourism, engineering, finance, libraries, parks and recreation, planning and development, public services, and special events. As part of the annual budget process, changes to the fee schedule based on an analysis of current charges as compared to cost recovery goals and/or comparison to surrounding entities is conducted. In addition, fees are reviewed to make sure they are still applicable. Resulting modifications are proposed by the departments. Actual fee schedule information is located on the city's website within the finance section. This repository is maintained by the city manager's office. It is recommended that the City Council approve the ordinances set forth in the caption above. Any comment before we move along? We can entertain a motion to approve the ordinance.
Move to approve the ordinances set forth in the caption.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. City Attorney?
This is an ordinance of the Louisville City Council amending the fee schedule of the City of Louisville by amending fees related to administration, community relations and tourism, engineering, finance, library, parks and recreation, planning and development, planning services, and special events, providing for a repealer, severability, and effective date, and declaring an emergency.
Council, if you'd please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Item 9, consideration of an ordinance adopting the fiscal year 2022-2023 tax rate. This action will adopt the city's annual ad valorem tax rate for all taxable property at .443301 per $100 of assessed valuation. The rate combines the following: maintenance and operations, .320981, and principal and interest on debt service, .122320, for a total tax rate of .443301. While the proposed total tax rate for fiscal year 2022-2023 is the same as the fiscal year 2021-2022 tax rate, the proposed tax rate exceeds the no new revenue tax rate of .396846. Therefore, specific language is required in the ordinance. The vote on this ordinance must be a record vote and approved by at least 60% of the members of the governing body. For the city of Louisville, this would equal at least 5 voting members. The specific language of the motion to adopt the ordinance must be made in the following form. I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of .443301, which is effectively an 11.7% increase in the tax rate. It is recommended that the City Council approve the proposed ordinance adopting the fiscal year 2022-2023 tax rate with the following motion. I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of .443301, which is effectively an 11.7% tax rate. Council, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, for the third time, I move to approve the proposed ordinance adopting the fiscal year 22-23 tax rate with the following motion. I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of .443301, which is effectively an 11.7% tax rate.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
City Attorney?
This is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Louisville, Texas, establishing the tax rate and tax levy for the City of Louisville, Texas for the year 2022-2023 upon all taxable property in said city in conformity with the laws of the state of Texas and the charter provisions in all ordinances of said city, providing a repealer, providing for severability, providing for an effective date, declaring an emergency.
Council, if you could please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Item 10, consideration of an ordinance of the Louisville City Council amending Chapter 5.5 Flood Damage Prevention of the Louisville City Code by amending Sections 5.5-16, 5.5-17, and 5.5-19, providing for a repealer, severability, penalty, and an effective date, and declaring an emergency. The Insurance Services Office, Incorporated, ISO, has reviewed the city's existing flood damage prevention ordinance and recommended certain changes to improve flood safety and thus the city's community rating system flood protection rating. Staff has determined that the ISO recommendations will help minimize flood risk and provide an opportunity to improve the city's community rating system CRS rating. It's recommended that the City Council approve the ordinance as set forth in the caption above. We do not have our city engineer available.
Where'd they go?
We have our assistant.
We have our assistant city engineer available. Folks, does anyone have any questions?
I would just like to make a statement that you mentioned that this will help us to improve our community rating system, our rating for flood. What that means is that we get better flood insurance rates. So I just wanted to point that out as to why that's important. And with that, I will move to approve the ordinance as set forth in the caption.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. City Attorney?
This is an ordinance of the Louisville City Council amending Chapter 5.5 Flood Damage Prevention of the Louisville City Code by amending Sections 5.5-16, 5.5-17, and 5.5-19, providing for repealer, severability, penalty, and an effective date, and declaring an emergency.
Council, if you please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Next up, we have reports, and Councilmember Jones.
All right, anybody looking for a great place to work, City of Louisville is partnering with Workforce Solutions for North Central Texas to hold a career fair on Thursday, October 6th at 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Louisville Grand Theater. We have a lot of positions out there. We're looking for great qualified people to come work at a great city. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
Man, that was a great commercial.
Right?
Yeah.
We need to read some of that stuff.
Brandon.
Yeah, we'll put that on YouTube.
I learned from Brent Daniels. He has the good baritone voice.
He does. Councilmember Cade?
I don't have any reports.
Thank you, ma'am.
I mean, I do have a lot of stuff to say, but I'll just.
You're welcome to say.
That's okay.
All right. City Manager?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all of our staff for doing an exceptional job with the rodeo this weekend. I know there'll probably be more to be said about that, but I was just incredibly impressed by all levels of this organization: park maintenance, street workers, and not walkers, workers, and I mean, all the way up to Eric Ferris, putting on his, Wranglers and lifting up heavy equipment the day before to make sure everything got done in time. I thought it was an exceptional event, and I'm just always impressed by the team for having, working hard. We have a culture of being hard workers in Louisville, but then also making sure that we take care of our people. So I want to thank staff.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Awesome. Go for it.
Also want to thank the staff for the cattle parade, the rodeo. I appreciate Eric Ferris just giving it kind of a little tour and explaining some of the systems. I think that's really helpful to understand the rodeo. Really looking forward to next year. I think this event, just both of these, just keep getting better and better. Also looking forward to Western Days this weekend. I think looking at the music lineup, which is always important to me, I think this is probably one of the most well-rounded music lineups I've seen in a while. I'm looking forward to some of the side acts as well. Library activities for the week: take a break Tuesdays for teens aged 13 to 18, Tuesday, September 20th, 4 to 5:15 p.m. No registration required at Teen Point. Backyard beekeeping, hopefully my wife doesn't see this, for adults, Wednesday, September 21st at 6:30 to 7:30. No registration required, Crawford Meeting Room.
I guess I will continue, if that's okay, Mayor.
Absolutely. Just putting out a little fire here. No problem.
Okay. First of all, City Manager Powell and Councilmember Meredith stole the first thing I was going to say, and that is thanks to all the staff for putting on a great event, working to put on a great event this weekend. PBR I really enjoyed it. I still have the dust from the rodeo arena on my boots, and I'm wearing the You Matter socks that I got at the event. So I'm still reliving some of the weekend. And now on to Louisville Grand Theater activities. We do have Western Days Festival coming up with a lot of performances and locations this Friday and Saturday. People have to look for parking, but that's okay. Everybody needs to come out for that. And then Friday night, Acoustic Jam Songwriting Challenge will be held on October 7th. This is presented by the Visual Art League of Louisville. And the word that has to be included in the songs that are written is mystery. So if you want to perform a song that you write, it has to be the first ever public performance, has to be at the Songwriters Challenge on October 7th. But if you want to write a song about mystery and perform it, come on out. Activities going on at the Grand Theater. Visual Art League Pan Pastel Workshop on October 4th and 5th. The Career Fair that has already been mentioned, presented by the City of Louisville on October 6th. And then a free art workshop, Design and Painting in Watercolor, presented by the Visual Art League of Louisville, will be on October 8th. Exhibitions, Mystery Metals Art and Photography by Tina Alvarez, presented by the City of Louisville through October 29th. Bramblett from the Beginning, presented by the City of Louisville from September 23rd through October 22nd. And finally, Limited Palette, presented by Visual Art League of Louisville, running September 24th through October 22. And That is all.
Thank you, sir. City Attorney? City Secretary? Officer, thank you again. Appreciate you being here. City staff?
No report, Mayor. Mayor, lake level report. Lake Louisville's level currently is at 518.22 feet and just shy of about 83% capacity.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, Mayor and Council, I would like to echo a lot of what you all have said. We work as a team, as staff. I don't really do a whole lot, but the other departments do. They're out there day in and day out, year after year. They did a great job at PBR. I'd really especially like to thank James Kunke and his staff with Darren Watkins, but all city staff members that were out there well before into the wee hours of the night. It's what we do. We have great teamwork. It's our strength as a city. We'll be working through this week with Western events all week long into the weekend. Then next week we have homecoming parade. So thank you to all the staff that get out there and get it done and make a safe, enjoyable experience. You know what makes Louisville really neat. So thank you to the staff, and thank you to the mayor and council for all the support you give us.
Thank you. Chief? I've got 3 small things. Number 1, shared tape.
Can I go?
Oh, yeah, gosh, darn it, I do it every freaking time. Dang it.
I would take it personally, but I saw you did the Chris.
Councilmember Green, Kelly.
So I just wanted to elaborate a little bit. So it was a lot of fun, the bull riding event, because I was told that there's a difference between rodeo and bull riding. So the bull riding event was a lot of fun. I think when I was told there's a difference, I was called City Boy as well in that process, but it's okay. But I did want to acknowledge bootcampaign.org real quick. So they did a fabulous gala on Friday. And I'm just going to read their mission real quick. I don't want to mess it up, so I don't want to wing it here. So the mission is to unite Americans to honor and restore the lives of veterans and military families through individualized life-improving programs. And especially important was when this was hit a recurring theme on Suicide Prevention Month and Week in September. So if you have a chance to go out there and visit bootcampaign.org, make a donation, find out more about their process and their program, it'd be fantastic. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. I'm so sorry. I owe you. A couple of quick things.
Wait a minute.
Wait, where am I?
You need
what am
to
I doing?
slow
I started
down.
with Brandon, didn't I?
You were just
I'm just out of my mind tonight. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm not going to belabor this point because I think many people have said it, but when my son came home Saturday night from the bull riding, he had this look on his face that was priceless, and he was like, "Mom, that was so much fun." And I thought, I wish I would have had a recording of that so you guys could all see it, because I know y'all are working really hard. But there were a whole lot of kids and a whole lot of adults that had that same expression on their face. And I know that that's what, makes it worth it for everybody to do all the hard work. And so we really do appreciate you. I saw in the announcements this week, so we're doing the Pet of the Week. Y'all, this Pet of the Week, her name is Glow. She's a 1-year-old Terrier American Pit Bull mix, and I'm telling you, she could be my dog's twin. And don't let the American Pit Bull scare you. I absolutely love the breed. They're amazing dogs. She is beautiful. Oh, I love her already, and just looking at her picture. Somebody go take her home. She is going to be an amazing companion. You're going to fall in love with her, and you better hurry up before I get there. You may go now, Mayor.
I'm going to wait. I'm just going to put another minute on the clock because
You haven't skipped anybody else.
I'm going to blame the blood draw I had this morning. That's what I'm going to blame it on. So thank you guys for your patience. A couple of small things. Number 1, Shared Table, the Main and Mill Association, the annual Shared Table event went online this morning. There's only about 124, 125 seats available, but it is a wonderful opportunity to meet other people, to build community, and it's one of my favorite things we do here in the city, and I really appreciate the Main and Mill organization for putting this together. We do have shuttles for Western Days. I want to thank DCTA for the partnership, as well as I think We've got a third-party vendor as well. So don't worry too much about parking. We've got lots of opportunities to get you back and forth. And then finally, I want to recognize that we have an august dignitary in the audience tonight.
Yes, we do.
We have our county commissioner, Ms. Bobby Mitchell. Bobby, do you have anything for us tonight? Well, we want to thank you for your insight into the district, as well as your advocacy in the upcoming county bond program. We'll have more conversations about that moving forward, but here in November, please keep your eye out for that program. With that, we do need to run back to item 9. There were 3 words left out of the motion, and by state law, we need to dot our I's and cross our T's. So, Councilmember Jones.
Okay, take 4. I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 0.443301, which is effectively an 11.7% increase in the tax rate.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Council, please vote. We can just out loud?
Aye.
All in favor? Opposed? You want to read that caption one more time?
Don't miss a word.
It's okay. Belt and suspenders when we deal with the state. Come on, Granicus.
This is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Louisville, Texas, establishing the tax rate and tax levy for the City of Louisville, Texas for the year 2022-2023 upon all taxable property in said city in conformity with the laws of the state of Texas and the charter provisions and all ordinances of said city, providing a repealer, providing for severability, providing for an effective date, declaring an emergency.
Council, please signify your acceptance by voting aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Are we good? All right. We are going to reconvene back into the workshop session regarding an update on the Public Safety Complex project. We'll be right next door. You're welcome to join us.
They both know what a clown burn is.
Yep, cheap. Whatever it was. All the cookware, WTS, hot dog cookers, they didn't work.
The clown works, didn't it?
I don't know.
I never had one, so I don't know.
Be all mad about it in their heads.
Brandon.
Like pre-Alexa.
Somewhere else.
He was having
A moment.
watered down.
Which watered down? The normal, that's not your morning drink, that's your afternoon.
That's her morning drink. Yeah. She doesn't have all the fruit in it, though.
All right. I think we're going to go ahead and move ahead. Councilmember Jones, I think, had to step away for a moment, but we'll go ahead and get started in the interest of time. Let's continue the workshop.
So, Mayor and Council, I want to walk you through a pretty complex parking and phasing plan of the 16-acre site, understanding this is where we are today, this is where we're going to start. As dates and perhaps phases of construction shift, and they may in the future, this parking plan will somewhat shift, but this is our idea. Parking is very important public, employees, and as well as the departments and the function of this site throughout the next 2.5 years. So if you recall, again, 16-acre site, in normal day, we had about 608 parking spaces on this property. 134 plus or minus were in the secured police parking area. That's all surface parked with a fence around it. We had about 474 around the campus. Remember, at current, Herring is not occupied. Stacy, I think, is going to move in around the first of the year. Probably won't program that building until after January 1st sometime for basketball tournaments, some racquetball. Again, it's not a rec center, but there will be public parking there, as opposed to over the last couple of years, nothing's been going on, so that has been somewhat of an overflow lot. Our first phase at this point would be around October 28th, that you see the large purple area there, the construction area. What we will do is go into that area and take save the trees as we can, but we will take the islands out, put asphalt over them, and this is a vital area for public, library patrons, and others to park. So we need to get this done quickly first. It's ahead of the parking garage. It'll be right behind it. You'll note that we will take the handicap spaces out of that area on the back side, and we'll mitigate those on the west side there. I'm going to get up so I can point. Wish I had the old pointer, but Chief McGrath will make fun of me. We'll take all the ADA out of the back parking lot. We'll put them on the west side. We still have ADA in the south side, but there is a ramp here that goes into the library, so we'll still be in good shape for the duration of the construction by putting all ADA here. You'll note that Miss Patty Guzik is a good partner with the city. She owns this property to the west of Civic. She's going to allow us to park on the north side and the south side of their buildings, her MOB there. And we will put in a crosswalk across Civic with paint, signage, perhaps flashers. We'll add some solar lights. We're looking for those 50 plus or minus spaces on the north and south flank, mainly for employee parking. So she's doing that at no cost to be a partner with the city. And we're working with her, and she's glad to do it. You'll also see some spaces on the county building to the north. Commissioner Mitchell met with department heads, so you'll see around 50 spaces on the north side of the south side of Civic County building. We'll be able to park there during construction if we need it. Both of these lots, we'll see how it goes. We anticipate we're going to need them. I anticipate maybe fire personnel parking up there. That's not emergency responders. They can flow there, as well as maybe library employees or maybe some other employees in the annex could park over at the Guzik property if we need to do that. We will have, again, signage throughout the site directing the public on where to go during the different phases. So around the 11th of November, you start to see 3 lots. You'll see mainly an employee lot to the north that we will start construction. The idea is we get this built, then all Parks and Recreation employees will be parking in the back of house at Herring. You'll start to notice the chart at the bottom here, the net change in the site. We're down 55 spots. Police and fire are still here. We'll start this parking lot as well. We'll take the circle that has no parking today, and we're going to reconstruct that into parking. We'll still have flow through, but you'll note that that's going on. We'll also take sanitary sewer, storm, and some other utilities and start phasing those relocations that come through where the parking garage is going to be, and we'll relocate that as well and get that going early on ahead of the start for the parking garage. So that's all going on around November 11th. You'll see these under construction for the next several months. We'll have pedestrian paths where employees and the public, this is still under construction, will be able directed to get into the annex. Employees or the public can come around here and come into the north elevation if they're an employee, or they come into the library this way. So it will be a construction site. We will be monitoring the safety of this, and we still will have flow through the site at this point. That's still, it will be very different than today. So around the 1st of December, December 2nd, you'll see that the purple parking lot is intact, and that's 95 spaces adding back. We're actually 52 ahead at this time. All 3 lots, the 2 pinks and the yellow, are still under construction, but you'll note that Byrne Construction starts to occupy this area here. We were hopeful that we would get the other property, but at this point we're still good to go with their construction office and their rally point here. Public access is still intact. The walkways, this changes dramatically in that public can park here, go straight into the library. If you take Google Maps takes you to this parking lot, or did a few months ago we tested, but again, this will be a vital parking area. We're still under construction here. I'm hopeful that one of these may be finishing up to start to relieve a little bit of the on-site parking. So again, around the 1st of December, a few days later, you'll see that we start fencing off for the parking garage. So we're down 82 because we lost the rest of what I call the baseball field parking in the rear. The 3 lots are still under construction, but that's when we start fencing off for the parking structure. We will have gates on the north end of that will be manned by Byrne, so we will have pass-through construction traffic, concrete trucks, fire lanes and whatnot coming through this area. So this will be gated for private access only, but it will serve again for emergency response. But a lot of the delivery trucks will be coming in and coming out in this area to keep them away from the front. This public access is still here. I did mention it, but as y'all already know, I mentioned before, we are closing this first driveway to the circle. The transition in stack was very short. Typically we have a 210-foot requirement, 110 transition with 100 stack on a turn lane. We put that in there years ago as a modified. It was not safe. That is the turn lane to Civic Circle, but we are closing that driveway with this project, and it doesn't impact access at all. So again, we are at December 9th. A few days later, at this point, around the 1st of the year, we're anticipating the fire department to move up to First Baptist Church. It'll be ready to go. And Chief McGrath has volunteered that he's an expert in moving, so he's going to do that with his pickup truck. But they're moving around the 1st of December. We anticipate that they will be gone and up at First Baptist, so you'll see the fire station goes under demolition under this date. And then you'll start to see some of the parking lots to the north, the Herring, the South Herring lot, perhaps are open at that time, so we gain vital parking there. Again, trying to keep as much public parking as we can around the campus, because again, we have IT, we have court, community room, library, there's a lot going, detention facilities, so again, we have to be conscious of that and be in concert with the county as well to the public. And voting is November 5th, 7th? Yeah. So that will be in the earlier phase, but we have to be aware of that and have that available to the public. So January 21 to February 14th-ish, parking structure will be under construction. Central is demolished. We'll pick up a little parking, as you'll see, with the demolition of Central Fire Station. We'll use some of that flat work as long as we can and gain some parking back. Police are still here at this time frame. Fire's gone, but police is still here. You'll see that the 35 spaces come online. The old circle parking down at Civic and Valley Parkway. We're up 13 spaces. Our access is still good. All the other lots are good to go, and we're still holding with any overflow parking on Ms. Guzik's property and Commissioner Mitchell's. February 14th to 18th, we're hoping to have the corner property by then, and that will be the construction offices and area and get them out of the footprint of the parking garage. And again, about this time, of February 18th, we're looking for PD to start a move over to Lakeway about this time. So when PD and fire are gone, it should relieve a lot of your traffic, especially in the eastern and southeastern section of the campus. This last slide, we're just showing fire lane access and kind of sequencing for safety during construction. You'll see the parking garage is still under construction, but we do have fire lane access for the annex, the jail, and for the garage. And then you'll have a fire lane that comes down through by Central until such time as we don't have a graphic on that. When we start main campus building, hopefully that GMP will go March or April, March to you all to approve the main campus here, and then we will have another parking plan once this starts. But it probably won't affect this too much. I look to have the reserve parking for the duration of the project at Ms. Guzik's property, as well as Commissioner Mitchell's. They've agreed to that. And that's where we are today on our parking. And we will take these plans. We sent them out today to the departments to start educating and getting feedback and trying to train this and educate the employees. We will use this to have an on-site parking plan, which we're going to need after the building opens anyway, to just manage. We have limited surface parking. The garage parking, of course, is only for fire and police personnel, court and city attorney, so the public won't have access to that. So we're going to have to really very mindful during and after we finish of how we park this campus. We certainly wouldn't want to have a big tournament in a gym function on voting day, or a big function in community room, or if the court, traffic picks back up, they're still working wonders and doing some online or whatever. So we're going to have a parking management plan on this 16 acres. We'll use this to start during construction, but we'll use it after, and be mindful of how we're managing our property.
As you can see, this is going to be a full contact sport out there. I think it's also important to note that there's still some variables. So when he's saying ish on the dates, with the PFC Bank, not PFC, what is it, PNC, I've got a PFC we just created tonight, so PNC Bank, that's, the time frame on that is still kind of up in the air. We'll talk about that later, but the rest of it, the big thing for you to realize is that those time frames are pretty accurate. So at the moment we start, we've been planning a really long time. As soon as we start, it moves really, really fast. So every month there's a change out there. And so just wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that and that we do have a plan.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Fantastic. The slide that showed those 50 spaces up north, the 225s, are there any thoughts, is it even needed, to help to put some of our micro-mobility up there? Put a couple scooters or something up there to help people get back and forth?
That's an interesting thought.
I went from not being a fan of it to saying, hey, there's an opportunity maybe to...
It's an interesting thought. Yeah, we can definitely talk to them about it. The time frame, though, well, we have the ones that are out on the street. We can talk to them.
I was just curious. I put it out there for consideration.
Yeah, might be at least let them know that this is going on.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an opportunity for them.
Keep in mind, we're probably around this time frame, February, we'll probably start Valley Parkway and Civic by March. You'll start to see some construction. It'll be really going by summer and fall of '23. That's an 12 to 18-month build that's adjacent to this. So, it's going to be a lot going on. But so much of that project is providing for this project and their access and a lot of the medians and a lot of the utility connects. So
it has to go together.
It's going to be directing a little bit of a chaotic band, if you will.
Might be a good opportunity to team up with DCGA to get folks to
take
the GoZone.
Take the GoZone into there. So, other questions, comments? Mr. Ferris, I've got two.
Yes, sir.
My first is that northern 25 on the Gusick property. I see people that are not going to walk down to the crosswalk. I know that's the intent, but if we can make sure that we've got good signage at least. That being on a curve, I see people come tearing through there.
Oh, yeah.
The sight lines are pretty bad. So that concerns me, whatever we can do. I know signs don't stop people from being stupid, but.
We may can do flashers, we'll see. And again, I saw some neat things on vacation where you actually had flags and hope you would carry one across, and because there's several on each side, you replace it,
Yeah.
but flasher signage, and again, our
I've seen the
idea.
flag thing.
Yeah. I saw it, it was actually, but again, I think what we can do is, what we envision is trying to keep as much public parking here. And again, some of this be at night. We are going to put lights here and lights in the back for pedestrian safety. That came up during some of our on-site meetings with the department over there, that it's going to be pretty dark walking through the back part as well as over at Patty's property, so we're going to get lighting in there. We show it here, but
Lauren and I are gonna get glow sticks.
Perfect.
I was gonna say pigeon sticks.
We get you those spinners like on the front of the fire trucks.
the crossing guard, the crossing walk guard, put the helmet there.
Pigeon spikes.
There we go, pigeon spikes all around.
Pigeon spikes.
Well taken, Mayor.
And the other concern I have, and you mentioned it as far as staff parking in the parking garage, I see where we're going to have maybe some training challenges, much like here in Old Town, when we have folks that work in Old Town and they park in front of their space and then they go, there's no parking. When the reality is the parking for that type of use is over here by City Hall. I'm hopeful that staff will be accommodating and maybe try and get a few extra steps on their Fitbits, and utilize some of this more maybe remote parking for their day-to-day if they can. And I think afterwards, yeah, we're gonna have to train folks, because I can guarantee there's gonna be somebody who has an office on the first floor and they're gonna be like, I'm not parking in the garage, I'm gonna park right here in the front. So I'm hopeful we can work through that, but I appreciate you identifying that.
I think both chiefs are going to do a great job of managing the parking garage. And again, I think that the idea is well taken, that we have the spaces, they're secured, and we don't want them competing with the public in the other parking lot. Because one thing I did not show you was that once the garage is open and the facility is almost built, we'll convert the 95 to the more permanent parking lot, because that will be temporary for the most part all the way through the project. The last thing built will be the 95 space to Ultimate, because what you're seeing, remember, is that temporary.
Yeah. I was going to add two more things to that. So to your point, obviously this is change management that we have to do. So with change management, you just have to over communicate. So our first step is with our employees, after presenting this to you guys, is to do an all-employee Zoom meeting to talk through that, so at least they get comfortable with what's going to be on the horizon, because it's coming soon. And the other thing, I totally forgot what I was going to say. I can't remember. Yeah, it'll come to me in a minute.
Quick question, Eric. For the Denton County spaces, is there a walking path through there, or would they have to walk like the parking lot when you come around?
It's a good point, Councilman. So we are going to, once we get a little bit better idea of how this lays out, we will have to have a public access path that comes from their parking lot. To answer your question, I don't believe there is. You have to come out to the street and you come across, but we will make a path around the site that we don't change it, because the parking garage will be in here, so we'll have to have a pedestrian around here or perhaps down here. But the shortest route, we think that most of the people parking are going to be fire personnel, maybe some PD, and they can come straight through.
Okay.
But again, I think if we do a great job here, we'll have as much public wanting to come from the northern side down. Commissioner Mitchell did ask that we stay to the north of this campus. We had really hoped for this, but that's where their employees park. And I'm not making Bobby mad. Ronnie, you can, but I'm not. So that's why that's that way.
I did remember the last one. So as complex as this is, so Burr Construction hasn't provided their ultimate GMP for the big enchilada project.
I love all these code words.
Yeah, but this is quote unquote, this is so complex, requires manning certain access points and all that stuff. I mean, this is, they have put forward a cost that might be as much as $800,000 for the full length of the project to man this. That's how complex this is. Now, Chris Squatter is still scrubbing those numbers. I don't know, I'm sure he will find a way to bring that down, but I just wanted to point that out, that there's a lot that has to go into this. So.
One thing we're working with Byrne is they're going to have to park. There's a lot of employees that'll be parked that'll be working this site for construction. At times, probably north of 200, especially on big pour days, informing. So they're talking to folks east of Valley Parkway and whatnot, so their workers walk onto the site and don't compete. the public.
That'd be awesome if we can
So
get
they're
that to work.
working through that to see how they flex, and that'll change during the construction timeframes, but there will be several months where there'll be a lot of employees on this site.
Well, Vern has been historically a really good partner, so.
Yes, sir.
One of the best.
All right. Other questions, comments? All right, with that, we're going to move into closed session, but we need to do that out there. So we will step out there, do the closed session, and then come back here.
Getting our steps.
Yeah, get your steps in. All right, we are back from workshop and back into our regular session. Council, we are now going to move into closed session in accordance with Texas Government Code Subchapter D, Section 551.071, consultation with attorney pending litigation, City of Louisville, Texas versus Texas Bank and PNC Bank, National Association, cause number CV-2022-1746, County Court at Law number 2, Denton County, Texas. Section 551.072, real estate, property acquisition, and Section 551.087, economic development, deliberation regarding economic development negotiations. We are now in closed session. All right, we are back into open session. Council, is there any action to be taken?
Mayor, I move to, 1, acknowledge the award of special commissioners in the amount of $1.75 million in the cause number CV-2022-01746, City of Louisville, Texas versus Texas Bank and PNC Bank, National Association, filed in the County Court at Law number 2, Denton County. And 2, authorize the city attorney or her designee to deposit $1.75 million in the registry of the court in compliance with the Texas Property Code, and to file an objection to the award of special commissioners if, in her opinion, such an objection is reasonable and necessary.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, if you'd please vote.
Aye.
Oh, yep, there we go.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. As there is no further action to be taken on this National Talk Like a Pirate Day, we are hereby adjourned.